what's up? I didn't know.
Senate leadership tussle. President Buhari meets two leading members.
I'm supporting the position of the party and its opposition, thereby endorsing the candidature of Senator Ahmed Lam.
8th National Assembly holds valedictory session ahead of dissolution on Saturday.
I thank the leadership of this Senate for their support for me. I'm the only woman amongst them.
The people of the Northeast will continue to remain grateful and will continue to remain indebted to this House for passing the Northeast Development Commission Bill.
Preparations in top gear for first Democracy Day celebrations on June 12th in Abuja.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we continue our assessment of 20 years of democratic governance in Nigeria with focus on the National Assembly.
NTA's flagship program, Good Morning Nigeria, in the last couple of editions have devoted time to assess the journey so far as it relates to 20 years of uninterrupted democratic rule in the country.
Now, our viewers will recall that we have focused on various aspects of our democracy, such as, of course, the gains and the pains, and the electoral process in particular, and what also has been the staying power for our democracy in the past 20 years.
Yeah, Kingsley, you'll recall that we have had a number of guests who believe that the electoral process in the last 20 years of democracy has seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And in recent times, from different quarters, there have been calls for more credibility in the electoral process to ensure fairness, equity, and justice. Of course,
Kirian, the submissions of our guests yesterday highlighted the fact that there have been positive changes that have come about in the electoral process. This, of course, notwithstanding the challenges that continue to persist, but that those positive reforms have actually come about on account of robust citizen engagement, such that the stakeholders along the value chain in the electoral process have, as it were, ensured that the elections that we have had continue to improve on what went on in the past.
Now, this morning, we intend to continue with our inquisition into Nigeria's democratic journey 20 years on by engaging another set of guests who will give us their perspectives on the impact of the National Assembly, even as the 8th National Assembly will be dissolved with effect from midnight Saturday, 8th June 2019.
That's right, Kyria. Now, guests on Good Morning Nigeria have raised several points with regard to our democracy in the past 20 years. That's to say the Fourth Republic since 1999. And what they classify as the tangible and intangible gains. But today, we're going to pose a question: how has the National Assembly, on its own part, contributed to sustaining democracy? And how also have the various pieces of legislation impacted on the citizens. Our focus, of course, is on the National Assembly, and Kirian, we are not neglecting the fact that as part of the democratic structure, we also have 36 state houses of assembly, which belong to the legislative arm of government. So in the process of the conversation, we expect our guests to also touch on those. But of course, we're not federalizing the arguments or the discussion one more time, but we'll be taking a look at the National Assembly since 1999 and the growth and challenges of our democracy. It's on that note we'd like to welcome you to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo, and it's good having you join us on the program, broadcast as always on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're live here in our Abuja headquarters studios.
And I'm Kirian Umayo. Thank you for joining us for today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. As always, we shall bring you the complimentary part of the program, which of course will include newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment. Now, the morning news is here with Chimobi Walter Naji. Hello, Chimobi.
Hello, Karen. Good morning, and good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria. Here is the morning news. I'm Chimobi Walter Naji. Now, the leadership tussle in the Senate may be easing off as two leading members in the race have decided to work together in the interests of peace and unity, both in the Senate and the country. This is the outcome of a meeting with President Muhammadu Buhari by the parties involved, Senator Ahmed Lawan and Senator Danjuma Goje, on the need for them to show more commitment to the nation and the APC.
In spite of the support I have among my colleagues, senators-elect, I have decided, in difference to the loyalty I have for His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, and in difference to my loyalty to my party, APC, in the interest of the unity of our party and the development of this country, in order to assist Mr. President to deliver on his promises, I have decided to respect his wish by not declaring to contest this Senate presidency. Instead, I am supporting the position of the party and its own position, thereby endorsing the candidature of Senator Ahmed Lawan.
And still on Danjuma Goje's withdrawal, the All Progressives Congress has commended Senator Danjuma Goje's decision to withdraw from the 9th Senate leadership contest in support of the party's endorsed candidate, Senator Ahmed Lawan. In a statement by the party's National Publicity Secretary, Larry Saunilu, they commended the fatherly role played by President Muhammadu Buhari in ensuring compliance with party's decisions and directives on the alleged sponsored reports against Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, the party's candidate for the speakership position of the 9th House of Representatives, that he was convicted by a court in the United States of America. The party urged Nigerians to ignore the phantom and infantile allegations. The party therefore urged Gbajabiamila and his vibrant campaign team to remain focused on their extensive country consultation and engagements, which have been well received and endorsed across party lines. Meanwhile, the 8th Senate has held its valedictory session, during which it announced that in the last 4 years, the legislators passed the highest number of bills than previous assemblies. The 8th Senate passed 318 bills, 190 higher than the 7th Senate.
I thank the leadership of this Senate for their support for me. I'm the only woman amongst them.
Those things that we have not gotten it right, we will work hard to ensure that we get them right.
Those in favor that this Senate do adjourn Senate die. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. Nay. The ayes have it. The Senate of the 8th Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria hereby stand adjourn Senate die.
And similarly, the valedictory session of the 8th House of Representatives has been held, during which House members stressed the need for lawmakers to provide effective representation for the benefit of the constituents and the good of the country.
thank you for putting what they call ice on the cake on my politics.
I want to thank the people of Nigeria for giving me the opportunity that I even know that I had something larger than myself to serve.
I look back at the 6th Assembly. When we came here, we had 27 women. And today, at the end of the 8th Assembly, we have only 4 of us left.
The people of the Northeast will continue to remain grateful and will continue to remain indebted to this House for passing the Northeast Development Commission Bill unanimously without a single voice of dissent.
And away from the legislature, preparations have been heightened ahead of the June 12 Democracy Day celebration in Abuja. Anthony Folsom reports that the chairman of the main organizing committee and secretary of the government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, alongside chairman publicity subcommittee Lai Mohammed, were at the Eagle Square to assess the level of preparedness for the grand occasion.
So far, the preparations are going on very well. We are confident that we'll be able to put up an act that is befitting the celebration of our new National Day, Democracy Day. It's going to be an interplay of our culture with military parade, and eventually the climax will be the new Democracy Day broadcast by the President. And I believe that Nigerians are expectant and they will not be disappointed.
A little on politics now. The state chairman of the All Progressives Congress have passed vote of confidence on the national chairman of the party and members of the National Working Committee. This was made known at the end of a meeting between the chairman and members of the National Working Committee held behind closed doors. The meeting, according to the chairman, reviewed post-election matters involving aggrieved members of the party.
We want to make sure, having won the presidency and having won the National Assembly, to make sure that the leadership of the National Assembly is as well the leadership we want, and not the leadership that will work against the program of the party.
We have read their presentation from those who felt angry, and the chairman has also presented to us his own version in-house, and we have all talked and decided that the best thing that will happen to the party is to resolve our problems in-house and then move forward.
More than 20 state chairmen attended the meeting, including National Working Committee members led by the national chairman, Adams Oshiomhole. Now, the Governor Bello Muhammad of Zamfara State has approved the immediate suspension of the Emir of Maru, Alhaji Abubakar Chika Ibrahim, and the district head of Kanoma in the same emirate, Alhaji Ahmed Lawal. This was contained in a statement signed by the Director General, Press Affairs, Government House, Gusau Alhaji Yusuf Idris. According to the statement, the duo were suspended following a series of complaints about their alleged involvement in banditry and other criminal acts in their domains. The statement further says the Emir and the district head would remain suspended until the outcome of an investigation into the allegation. This is the Emir is directed to hand over official vehicles and all other government property in his possession to the most senior district head of the emirate, while the suspended district head should hand over to the most senior village head in the district. The statement concludes Maru local government area is one of the LGA's worst hit by the activities of armed bandits in Zamfara State. And the National Broadcasting Commission has suspended the operating license of dark communications operators of AIT and Ray Power Radio until further notice. The Director General of NBC, Ishak Modibukawu, made this known to newsmen in Abuja.
There is no licensee, no matter how big or small, that is bigger than its regulator. What has happened is that over the years, dark communications have behaved as if they cannot be regulated.
And that's the news for now. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kieran and Kingsley just after the break.
The general public is hereby invited to the unveiling ceremony of a historical exhibition in pictures, arts and immersive environment as part of activities lined up to mark the 2019 Democracy Day commemoration. The exhibition with the theme Unbroken Democracy will be unveiled by His Excellency, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. Date 7th June 2019. Venue International Conference Center, ICC. Time 4:30 p.m. Please note, the exhibition will remain open to the public until June 12, 2019. Boss Mustafa, Secretary to the Government of the Federation, announcer.
It's Ramadan. It's okay to share what you love. Ramadan Kareem from Indomie. Indomie Super Pack now available at 85 Naira.
Milo Ready to Drink with Active Go is made with the natural goodness of milk, malt and cocoa with essential vitamins and minerals, so you can pack the winning energy of Milo into your lunchbox to make sure your jump is always ready to keep winning every day. Milo, the energy food drink of future champions.
The subcommittee on the First Lady's activities for June 12, 2019 Democracy Day celebration hereby announces the programs to be hosted by Her Excellency, Dr. Mrs. Aisha Muhammadu Buhari, wife of the President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, to mark the occasion. Secondary school exhibition and panel discussion and oratorical contest. Date, Monday 10th June 2019. Venue, International Conference Center, Abuja. Time 10 a.m. These programs are strictly by invitation. Hajia Maria A.D. Rufai, Secretary, Subcommittee on First Lady's activities for June 12, 2019 Democracy Day celebration, announcer.
Me, I am ready for the party. Oh yeah, my one job is smart. I go really early. Oh, I know your story. I go yaba to buy material. I go time my daily, yeah. I gonna say I don't. If you see my daily, oh, it go on everybody. Daily. Let me guide you to yellow. Let me guide you to yellow. Let me guide you.
3G is great. 4G is better. You don't know what you're missing till you experience it. Upgrade to a 4G device and SIM, SMS Get to 141 to enjoy double data on Nigeria's widest 4G network.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
Television studio lighting requires skills which can only be acquired through professional training. NTA TV College JOS therefore invites engineers and technical officers in public and private television stations to a special 4-week course on television studio lighting. Date 10th June to 5th July 2019. Course fee 100,000 Naira only per participant. Accommodation fees inclusive. Venue NTA TV College, Rayfield, JOS. The course will expose participants to modern techniques and technologies of television studio lighting, operation of studio lighting equipment, and the profound effect of lighting on television broadcast. For more enquiries, please call 0803-314-4383 or 0806-980-9807. NTA TV College, training you to be the best you want to be.
All right, you're welcome back, and now it's time for us to take some business stories on the rising dollar inflow through the investors and exporters' forex window, plus foreign reserves, and how all of these have tended to stabilize the naira on both the official and parallel markets. Our correspondent has details of the stories.
I&E Forex window has attracted $48 billion to the economy in 24 months. The Central Bank of Nigeria confirmed this in its updated report on the dollar inflows. The report also showed that foreign reserves have also risen to $45 billion with improved availability of foreign exchange. The exchange rate at the I&E Forex window has remained stable over the past 2 years at an average of 360 naira to a dollar, and the parallel market exchange rate has appreciated from 525 naira to a dollar in February 2017 to 360 naira to a dollar at present. The CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele said the introduction of the window along with improvements in domestic production of goods has helped shore up the external reserves. The report noted that although the level of reserves was still below the record high of $64 billion realized in August 2008, it is nearly double the $24 billion recorded in October 2016, increasing by more than $21 billion with current standing.
In the area of conserving foreign exchange, we introduced a demand management approach in order to conserve our reserves and support domestic production of items that can be produced in Nigeria. In this regard, we analyzed our import bill and encourage manufacturers to consider local options in sourcing their raw materials.
Meanwhile, the Nigeria Stock Exchange closed Thursday after the 2 days public holiday on a negative note. Here is a graphic representation of closing figures at the floor of the exchange. With business news, I'm Chimobi Walter Naji.
Thank you, Chimobi, for that business package. Next on Good Morning Nigeria is newspaper review.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyebe, is with us in the studios. As always, Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Kirian. Good morning, Nigeria.
Yeah, Bayo, we're glad to see you again today. Now, we have about 5 newspapers, Kinsley, and let me begin with the leadership newspaper. Just below the nameplate of the leadership newspaper, State Chairman passed confidence vote on Oshomole. Yeah, that's on page 12. Federal government revokes 6 oil firms' licenses on page 18. And NBC shuts down AIT Ray Power Radio. That's on page 6. Now, Senate presidency, that's for the lead story. Goje quits race, backs Lawan. It's on page 4. With 3 riders, APC hails decision. I won't step down, says Ndume. Saraki Dogara bow out, recount experience. Now, another striking story here, which I'd like us to share in the course of this newspaper review, is Nigerians who won elections in the diaspora. That is page 5. And you discover that these Nigerians are in different parts of the world: Canada, Belgium, UK, Italy. And of course, one of them will be the first senator, black senator in Italy. That's a good story. Now, Zamfara governor suspends Emir district head over banditry. It's on page 11. But that will be it for leadership newspaper, Kinsley.
All right. Now, from the Nigerian pilot, just go from the top to bottom. Below the nameplate of the Nigerian pilot says Buhari dissolves 8th National Assembly, proclaims June 11th for 9th. That's the 9th National Assembly. Details on page 5. Zamfara State Governor Matawale suspends Emir with immediate effect. That's page 7. This story says CCB, that's Code of Conduct Bureau, moves against ex-governors and lawmakers. And you have a number of riders there. It says probes ex-governors over alleged infractions in assets declaration forms. And then it says, one of the rider there says, Bureau working with presidential panel on assets recovery, DSS and EFCC. Now, there's a photograph there on the front page of the Nigerian Pilot, and below that is a story. These are the top officials of DAR Communications, owners and operators of AIT and Ray Power. Dr. C wants NBC boss Kawu sacked for alleged fraud and partisanship. That story is in greater detail on page 9. Ihed Yoha sets subcommittee to review Okorocha's appointments, page 7. On page 11, 2 killed and 6 injured after youth soldiers clash in Adamawa. Court refuses to stop Bajabia Miller from speakership race, page 9. Goje succumbs to pressure, bows out of Senate presidency race. And EFCC boss Magu closes 5 billion naira case against Sun newspaper. That's a defamation suit. Air pollution, cost of most terminal ailments, says Varsity Dawn, page 11. Bio.
Well, let's start with the story about the oil block. The federal government has revoked 6 oil blocks license. This is due to what the Department of Petroleum Resources called legacy debt owed the Federation. The Nigerian petroleum industry notified that oil mining lease number 98, 120, 121, 108, 101, and 206 are now revoked. The move is reported to be in furtherance of the presidential directive on recovery of legacy debt owed the Federation as provided for in the Petroleum Act of 2004. Daily Trust reports that part of the federal government approval to collect taxes and royalties owed by the Federation is the initiative that has been so carried out by the Petroleum Resources. Some companies had actually been indicted by NTA for owing legacy debts. On the issues of suspension, there are 2 reports of suspension. And the Emir and the district head have been suspended in Zamfara. This was directed by the Governor Mutawale. And you may be recalled that the Minister of Defense, the SY Minister of Defense, had alleged in April that some traditional rulers were actually aiding banditry in Zamfara. In fact, the Emir of Bangudu had put him on spot to name those traditional rulers. And consequently, yesterday, the secretary to the state government in Zamfara announced the suspension of 2 of these, an emir and a district head. A commission of inquiry is to be set up to look at their involvement in aiding banditry. The other one is the one by the National Broadcasting Commission. NBC announced the suspension of the license of DAR Communication, particularly for the stable of the AIT and Ray Power. The Director General of the National Broadcasting Commission, Isaac Modi Bukau, says that the media are required to shut down until further notice. At the press briefing, the DG said that the DAR Communication has inability to pay their license renewal fees and also airing a documentary on the Presidential Tribunal while the matter is still before a tribunal on May 22nd and May 23rd. The DG asked that for over 2 years now, the NBC has summoned the management of the DAR Communication over breaches, particularly on political platform and Kakaki. And therefore, the National Broadcasting Commission, acting in consonance with its powers powers of the Act of the NBC, particularly Section 10 of the 3rd Schedule, had now ordered that those licenses be suspended. Meanwhile, there have been some reactions on it. The founder of DAR Communication, Chief Alego Dekosi, says that his subsidiaries are being persecuted by NBC on alleged instructions. He claims that imposition of license fee of 500 million is made on private stations, while government-owned stations are asked to pay only 10 million. The Nigeria Guild of Editors says the action is unacceptable and will not stand. The Nigeria Union of Journalists says it has given 24 hours notice for the decision, the suspension, to be rescinded. Meanwhile, there are some political reactions. The Ohaneze Ndigbo, the People's Democratic Party, the chairman of the party, and the presidential candidate of the PDP have all reacted, condemning the action of the National Broadcasting Commission.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the latest from the media angle. That's our constituency.
Yes, the law establishing the National Broadcasting Commission provides several levels of sanctions in the code, as well based on the code, and also the act establishing the NBC. And they range for, especially where there has not been compliance with the code of the National Broadcasting Commission. And the code in force now is the 5th edition. And some of the sanctions vary from ordinary warning, including sometimes fine, heavy or minor, and also suspension or reduction in broadcast hours. In extreme circumstances, the Commission has powers to even revoke licenses. But in this instance, I think it's a suspension, and the suspension means a temporary withholding of the license pending situations that are maybe normalized, and then the station can go back on the air. But to close down a broadcast station has always been a contention, because several meanings will be read into it. But licenses are held on conditions, because one of the conditions for which a license is granted to any licensee is that it shall be used for purposes of enhancing national unity. And one of the allegations that NBC is making here is grievous, in the sense that it is alleging that the station is being used for divisive instances, and which are very grave in the context of the NBC Act and the Broadcasting Code.
All right. Bayo, thanks. There's another suspension, by the way. Sudan has been suspended by the African Union.
Well, that is long expected, because the stand of the Organization of African Union, the African Union on military intervention is non-negotiable.
Not only that, what actually played out lately in Sudan was surprising, because when the military junta was removed, we thought that those that came were actually going to bring about some reforms and listen to the opposition, which has been demanding that a civilian be allowed to take over an interim government, until the election is held in the country. But as it stands now, people are losing their lives in Sudan.
That's right. I'm just going to say, Bayo, with regard to the suspension of the operating license of Dar Communications, operators of AIT and Ray Power, and the reactions that we have also talked about, Guild of Editors, NUJ, politicians, and so on and so forth. I think it's important that you have a lot more information out there in the public space before the environment gets polluted by all kinds of insinuations, claims and counterclaims. Chief Raymond Dopasi himself addressed the media. His lengthy statement has also been in circulation. So there are points that he raised, and those points will need to be clarified. And of course, the NBC has its powers, as you rightly observed. Those are the powers of a regulator deriving from the act establishing it, and the code, which is the code is derived from stakeholders' contributions.
Yes.
There have been two key points that have been in the public domain since this action took place yesterday. Was one, the discriminatory license fee regime for private operators and then government operators. NBC will need to explain that to the public so that it's not seen as muzzling. And then the other one, of course, has to do with the broadcast of a documentary on the presidential elections petition tribunal. The question that arises is, look, was it contemptuous? The tribunal has powers.
All right. Okay, well, let's leave it there and see what happens as the days come by. Now, let's take the Daily Sun newspaper. But it's right-hand side of the Daily Sun newspaper. I have Kano, Gandija queries Sanusi with two riders, gives a mayor 24 hours to respond.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's also the point. As I said, this is a matter that's going to run for a while. Bayo, NBC also referenced social media contributions that are aired.
Yes.
That are aired. Sometimes, when you get a lot of these tweets, a lot of gatekeeping is required, Kirian. A lot of gatekeeping is required. I mean, it's apart from the typos that you find and the tweets, especially for a live broadcast. Sometimes, you know, you need to arrest the comments of some of these young persons.
There's need for investigation because all the platforms on social media are greatly utilized in sending messages, some of which have not been verified, and some are not even verifiable in the first place. But for you, as somebody who is operating an establishment such as AIT and Ray Power, there is need for proper gatekeeping, as Kinsley rightly pointed out. You know, before you push anything, you are getting from the social media.
Well, the approach in conventional media is any information you get on the social media must be treated with suspect, because unless you verify, you stand a risk in taking it hook, line, and sinker. And the NBC alluded to this because it noted that it cited the divisive comments on Kakaki Social, featuring comments like Nigeria is cursed.
You can't take that bio.
Yes. Okay. All right. Let's leave it at that, because NBC will clear the air very soon. Now, Kano, that Ganduje Kweri Sanusi gives Emir 24 hours to respond. We are studying letter Monarch's Aid says. It's on page 11. And, of course, the lead story is on the Senate presidency. Coast clears for Lawan with 3 riders. Why I stepped down after meeting Buhari. That's Goje. Ndume Kicks insists on contesting. Nnamani backs Kalu for deputy Senate president. Yeah, that's the major stories on the front page of a Daily Sun newspaper.
Yeah, Bayo, we'll take the editorial now, and then you have comments on the editorial plus other highlights you might have. The editorial is taken from Blueprint newspaper, and it's at page 12. And the title is Super Falcons Should Fly Beyond Africa. Super Falcons should fly beyond Africa after the Flying Eagles crashed in Poland.
Under 20.
Yes.
Have they vacated their hotel now?
Well, that was on Tuesday.
Yes.
So if they are still there, or if they were still there up to yesterday, they would have accumulated base for under 3 nights, I believe.
But meanwhile, the story that Kirian read, the Emir of Kano has been asked to respond to allegations of misappropriation of about 3.48 million naira. This letter making this demand was signed by the secretary to the Kano State government. This is sequel to an investigation that was carried out by the Kano State Public Complaints and Anti-Corruption Commission that investigated expenditure of the emirate between the year 2014 and 2017. And sadly, Salah celebration all over the country had been very peaceful, except that there was Hawan Daushe in Kano, which unfortunately resulted into one death. Hawan Daushe is usually a colorful Durbar ceremony that attracts a lot of people in most ancient cities in northern Nigeria. Bauchi held its own successfully. Gombe also held. In Zaria, in fact, they always hold Hawan Salah, Hawan Dauchi, and Hawan Bariki. In Kano, the Kano State government cancelled Hawan Nasarawa, which is the traditional homage of the emir to the governor. But the one they held, the spokesman for the police said that 1 person has been killed, 6 suspects have been arrested. And so the police is trying to put that under control. Now, talking about falcons flying beyond Africa, I hope they will remember that Nigeria is in Africa, and they will fly to return home to Nigeria. What the editorial is alluding to is the fact that the Falcons is the 9 times champion of Africa. But whenever they have gone onto the world stage, they have always fizzled out. And the threat usually is that they have crumbled when their opponents are coming from Europe and also even the United States, particularly some of the Asian tigers too that are coming on prominently in female football, particularly Japan and sometimes even Korea. And so the editorial is saying that with their new coach, Thomas Dennerby, who is now a foreign coach, they expect that he will be able to elevate the Falcons.
Is that a matter of coaching? Is that really a matter of coaching? Because some of our girls are playing in the diaspora, so perhaps it's not a matter of coaching. It's a matter of having the spirit to fight during a competition. I don't think that all those European ladies play much better than our girls.
All right.
Well, I think it's a combination of all. Many of our girls that play in the Falcon play play in professional clubs in Europe.
Exactly.
And some of them also from the home league form the team.
All right. Bayo and Kirian, thank you very much. The issue of the Super Eagles and what they do, and the Super Falcons, we wish them the very best. I recall Mia Hamm, if you remember her,
Yes.
she was a United States female soccer player. There was one year they took on the Nigerians, and then the headlines later was Mia Hamm, Hamas, Super Falcons. But we wish them the very best.
Let me remind you guys that
Kirian.
Bendel Insurance and Kora United have been relegated to the second division. No, but this is
all right.
It's
on that note that we would like to thank Bayo Atoyebe for being with us. Kieran is reminding me of Bendel Insurance. Of course, 1978 October, Bendel Insurance destroyed the Enugu Rangers in the FA Cup final.
You are now in second
October
division.
1978.
You are now in second division.
All right, so Bayo Atoyebe, we hope you have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much.
See you again on Monday. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with 20 years of democracy, the role and highs and lows of the National Assembly.
Turn up to more music, comedy, dance, and more. The Republic, featuring an array of Nigeria's finest. One day called Rema, Psycho Wipey, today we reflect. Fireboy DML, oh baby, I'm getting jealous, don't wanna see. Classic Tempo, and other surprise performances. Host Sheila and Jukes the General. Date June 9th, 2019. Venue International Conference Center, Abuja. Red carpet 4 p.m. Main show 6 p.m. For inquiries, call 081-0302-9457. The Republic, brought to you by Edgemax Media, supported by OSGF, Sosa, Vidi La Vida, Dre and iBlend, Moscow, Eventi, and Hennessy. The Republic, turn up!
This event is part of the activities lined up for the celebration of Democracy Day 2019.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
I can taste the real chicken.
Real chicken. Don't worry, Abba. It's not your chicken.
It's the Sadap Supreme Chicken Essence that gives it the supreme chicken taste. Be Supreme, Nigeria.
All right, this background report you are about to watch is on the National Assembly in the last 20 years, and it is put together by Kunle Adeye.
Having witnessed several disruptions, the legislative arm of government returned in 1999 when the military handed over power to civilian administration. After 2 decades of legislative activities, it is time to appraise what has transpired in the 2 chambers of the National Assembly. Both chambers have gone through what could be described as the good, the bad, and the ugly. Many say the takeoff of the National Assembly at different times has been characterized by leadership tussle, which created friction among members. Eventually, these issues were resolved to pave way for legislative business. In the course of this legislative assignment, the Senate has produced 7 Senate presidents. They include Evans Enwerem, Chuba Okadigbo, Ayim Pius Ayim, Adolphus Wabara, Ken Nnamani, David Mark, and Bukola Saraki. The House of Representatives has also had 7 speakers. Salisu Buhari, who emerged the speaker in 1999, was replaced by Gali Umaru Naaba. Aminu Bello Masari presided over the House between 2003 and 2007. The only female speaker, Olubumi Ete and Dimeji Bankole, were speakers between 2007 and 2011, while Aminu Waziri Tambuwal presided over between 2011 and 2015. Yakubu Dogara was elected the Speaker of the 8th House from 2015 to 2019. The primary functions of the legislators is to act as checks on the excesses of the executive and make laws for the well-being of the citizens. In the area of bills, the two legislative chambers have passed a lot of bills aimed at improving the lives of Nigerians. There have also been constitutional amendments to strengthen the nation's institutions. In the area of oversight, the legislature in the last 20 years has undertaken this task with a lot of vigor, putting the executive on their toes. However, there have been criticism that this task could have been done better with more results. The public perception about the national legislators has not been encouraging due to allegations of huge allowances that are said to be shrouded in secrecy. There are also allegations of corrupt practices. With the 8th National Assembly wrapping up, there are many questions to raise on the role that the federal legislature has played in sustaining the nation's legislative culture. As it is often said, without the legislature, no society can boast of democracy. The question is, how well have legislators represented Nigerians in the past 20 years of its democracy? These and other questions will be answered by guests on Good Morning Nigeria shortly.
All right, thank you very much, Kunle Adeyeye, there for that backgrounder. And just to remind our viewers, Kirian, you recall we said this while we're introducing to this program that our focus today is on the National Assembly and 20 years of democracy, and that we are not ignoring the fact that we have 36 state houses of assembly, and in states where the local government system is running, you also have the legislature in those localities. But our focus today has to do with legislature and 20 years of our democracy, legislature in this case representing the Federal National Assembly. We have guests already in the studios, as our correspondent indicated, and they will be taking on this subject matter. Let's welcome distinguished Senator Alius Sabi Abdullahi. He's chairman of the Senate Committee on Media and Publicity. Distinguished Senator, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Also here with us in the studios, we have Honorable Abdul Razak Namdas. Abdul Razak Namdas is the opposite number. He's the chairman of the House Committee on Media and Public Affairs.
All right, now,
pleasure to have you with us. Shall we say outgoing? I think that would be a outgoing until Saturday.
All right, we have in the studio a pair. He's a legislative analyst and, of course, the executive director, Order Paper Nigeria. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you, Karian.
All right, and with us all the way from Nasarawa State University is Professor Maxwell Gidado, Professor of Constitutional Law. Prof, it's good to have you this morning.
A pleasure.
Yeah, gentlemen, you're welcome.
Thank you. All right, Professor Gidado, of course, is also a learned senior advocate of Nigeria. Well, gentlemen, 20 years, and it's the longest that we've had. Legislators will always complain that whenever there was disruption of a republic, disruption and therefore overthrow of a republic, it was the legislature that was most impacted. Usually, you have the executive and the judiciary still functioning, but the executive will fuse the powers of the legislature. Here we are marking 2 decades of unbroken democratic governance with the legislature in place. What's your assessment? Let's begin with Senator Sabi Abdullahi.
Well, good morning, viewers. Thank you very much for having me. I think from what you have said, the truth is that when you remove the legislature, I think you will look for another name for that government, but not democracy, definitely. Because you can liken the legislature as the brain box of a car, for example. And if you remove the brain box, of course, the car remains there. It becomes dysfunctional. So I think it is true, and it is actually a fact that the legislature is the heartbeat, is that arm of government that makes democracy vibrant, that makes democracy possible. And if you look at the Nigerian Constitution, the role given to the legislature is very clear: lawmaking, oversight, representation. And if you assess how far we have gone on this front, I think that is where you can now situate how well the legislature has performed. And it is, I think kudos to Nigerians and even the watchdog of, our democratic movement. Here you're talking about the press, the civil society, and the like, who have remained very resolute in looking at those nuances that threaten democracy in any form and try to bring it up as, a topical issue to be looked at. And I think so far so good. We have done very well. Of course, because of this also, it also means that the institutional memory of the legislative arm has suffered the most in our governance. And to that extent, I think you can now, see the extent to which we must commend the legislature in holding forth from beginning when this Fourth Republic started. For example, after so long, with so many things not there. In fact, most of the people who found themselves in the National Assembly in 1999 had never experienced, any legislative function. Yeah, there are quite a couple of people, but what is the level of corporate memory that was available at the beginning? And so from that moment to now, a lot has happened, a lot has been built, and I think it is kudos also to Nigerians, like I said earlier, that we're able to get this far. And I'm convinced as we move on, we are definitely going to begin to learn from the lessons of our errors and mistakes and build upon it. And I think the 8th Senate, of which I'm privileged to be a part of, has done tremendously well with respect to looking at the past and then learning from those past and trying their best to improve on where we are, at least when you assess them on the basis of these areas of mandate or functions given to them by the Constitution.
All right.
Interesting. Kingsley, at the opening comment that we made, there was a reference to the fact that Nigerians within the last 20 years witnessed the good, the bad, and the ugly with respect to legislative arm of government. Well, it is believed or known the world over that the legislature is very prominent and paramount when it comes to democratic dispensation. And Nigerians have seen it all between 1999 and the year 2019. And I'd like the Honorable Abdul Razak Namdas, who is also a key player in the National Assembly, to give us his own assessment of what transpired right from the OBJ administration to the present dispensation.
Well, thank you so much. Good morning, viewers. I think my colleague actually captured the situation. I will only add that we are so grateful that between 1999 to this moment, we have had an uninterrupted transition between civilian to civilian administration, and that is why we are celebrating the 20 years of democracy and the existence of the National Assembly. Because if it were interrupted, we should be talking about a different topic at the moment. But the good thing is that as we grow and we keep maturing with time, for instance, during the OBJ period, even though the institution of legislatures was still growing, you could see how the number of presiding officers were always being removed, impeached. At one point, you have more than 5 or 4 of them, Senate presidents changing as if it is a yearly thing. But if you can look at it now, we have started stabilizing. Look at the 8 Senate and the 8 House of Reps, or let me say the 8 National Assembly. It's probably the fact that the leadership came with some kind of turbulence. At least we didn't change our leaders. We ended up successfully. And thank God that I am still going to be part of the 9th Assembly. We will also ensure that we try to improve on what happened in the 8th. And I must say that in terms of productivity, if you look at the history of the National Assembly, the second assembly is better than the first. The third is better than the second. The fourth is better than... So even the 8th is better than the 7th. And I am hoping that we should have a better 9th National Assembly than the 8. The kind of number of bills, motions, petitions that we have churned out, investigative hearings that we've been able to conduct, oversight functions, they have been credible. And I think we have done quite well. We will improve. We have a little lapses. The criticisms from individuals, academicians, NGOs, and what have you, and we take those in good faith. We improve in the 9th Assembly.
All right, Honorable Namdas, thank you very much. Let's bring in now Professor Maxwell Gidado, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who, by the way, also, in the course of his academic work, spent a sabbatical period, that's 1 year, at the National Assembly. Professor Gidado, what's your assessment of the National Assembly 2 decades on?
Yes, thank you very much, viewers. Now, the first thing I would want to say is that the Fourth Republic and the experience that Nigerians went through, particularly with the workings of the legislature, has proven that Nigerians love democracy. And this comes to play when you see the way they troop out after every 4 years to vote their representatives to come to the National Assembly, state assemblies, to represent them. So, and as far as the assessment of the legislature is concerned, what I've seen is that the legislature has proven to be the bulwark of the democratic experience in Nigeria. And particularly when one looks at the fact that it is the most misunderstood arm of government, it is the most stunted arm of government, but without it, there's no democracy. As far as the legislature is concerned, it is the glue, that holds the other 2 arms of government. So, and if one looks at the kinds of bills and the experiences this, particularly the National Assembly, has gone through, you will discover that it has helped tremendously in the growth of democracy in Nigeria. Each assembly comes with challenges, no doubt about that. But if I would rate the 8th assembly, I would take it as one that has exhibited that act of maintaining its independence. Because in a democracy, the 3 arms are supposed to be independent and get about its activity without any hindrance or without any interference. And the legislature had been on this very aspect of trying to be independent ab initio, particularly going by the provisions of Section 50 that tells them or makes them to elect amongst themselves their principal officers. By the time you allow the executive or any other arm to dictate to them as to how to get about their leadership, then you are definitely going against the principle of separation of powers. Because as propounded by the founding father of separation of powers, they are supposed to be distinct, separate, and independent. But when there's an interference and the assembly toes that line, then that gives a very big challenge to the workings of the National Assembly. And when you look at the bills that were passed by the 8th Assembly, these are bills that you could describe as, some of them are pro-masses. A typical one that comes to mind is the law or the bill to amend the Electoral Act. Now, with elections, periodical elections, as a mechanism where electorates will vote in both the executive and the legislature, any amendment that will smoothen this exercise is a welcome development and is pro-masses. If you also look at the petroleum industry bill, still under this 8th Assembly, and you look at also the Northeast Development Bill, which looked at a section of the country that has been devastated because of the insecurity in the nation brought about by Boko Haram. And if a legislature tries to reflect and assist towards ameliorating the sufferings of a particular people, you can describe such a legislation as pro-masses. So you can go on and on. As far as when you look at even in terms of number, they have passed the largest number or the highest number of bills, running to about 318. That's Senate. And the House of Reps, about 389, as opposed to the 7th Assembly that passed only 219. Sorry, the 8th Assembly, 219. So when you look at the totality of the bills, as well as the petitions and the motions that were moved, you would get to know that there is some improvement that goes along with each assembly, and that should be encouraged. That is what we would want to see in a typical democracy, where the independence of the legislature will be brought to bear in their own exercise, such that there is that element of doctrine of separation of powers being implemented both by the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, standing and looking at aspects that if there will be any conflict coming out of these two, they will intervene and interpret for the interest of the democratic movement.
All right. Well explained, if you ask me. And starting from 1999, as Namdas pointed out, that there were initial hiccups, at the National Assembly, and that also lasted for over 8 years. And we are talking about a learning process here, which our friends in the National Assembly would say, look, that we are learning. But I do believe, quite frankly, that any child that is up to 20 years, is now a man. And many Nigerians have observed the National Assembly with key interest since 1999. And that's why I will bring in, a peer who I'm sure has been following activities of lawmaking and others at the National Assembly to give us another perspective to this assessment of this very, very important arm of government. So what's our own assessment of this very National Assembly of Nigeria, which of course has so many records of ups and downs, if you ask me?
Kieran, thank you. Congratulations to Nigerians, 20-year stretch of democracy. Kudos must be given to citizens for keeping faith. Critical question is, however, as the legislature kept faith with Nigerians, are lawmakers able to say that they have delivered on the expectations that Nigerians hold of them? And I think that in making an assessment of the National Assembly, of the legislature generally, that's the critical question that we must bear in mind. But for me, I would say that it's a stream of cheers and some jeers, and somewhere along the line, there is a learning curve, like you said. And the learning curve, it's never enough learning. 20 years, a child, an old man who is even 80 years could still be learning, so the learning curve continues, And we must underscore this learning curve with the kind of background that we have to democracy in 1999. The military, long years of military rule, and then the presidency, 1999, 2007. The president, is a former military man, a general, So you see that military complex, that it became a throw-in into the first 8 years of democracy, and continues to some extent to be noticed in how the legislature and executive have operated. So for me, I would see that why there's some cheers to make, some jeers to call attention to, I think the greater challenge is what I call, there's the challenge of what I call democratization of dissent and politics of accommodation, given the background that I have just given. Because the kind of people who were elected to operate democracy, in return in 1999, were those who saw dissent, who had a temperament not given to dissent. And so that affected the way the legislature operated. So you saw a legislature that was thrown into suddenly a learning curve. Like the senator said, no institutional memory. Everything was like from the beginning, from the start, and then they were faced with an executive arm of government that was not much given to dissent. We have it my way or the highway, and that's accounted for much of the, very fractious relationship you saw between the executive and the legislature, with the change of leadership, 5 Senate presidents in the first, the fourth assembly, I think, all of that. So we must not fail to bring that up in assessing the legislature. So it's like a baby who is learning and impeded by the forces of the environment around it. But be that as it may, I think that the legislature needs to critically examine itself whether it has lived up to expectations. And for me, I think that it's too early to chest thump, as it appears to be the case from the earlier speakers, because there's a whole lot that needs to be done. There's a whole lot that is expected from the conduct and performance of legislators and the legislative institutions. They have done quite a lot. But there's a whole lot, given the expectations, the huge expectations indeed, when Nigeria got back democracy in 1999, that needs to be mirrored, with respect to how far we have come. So I think that the jury is still out. I think that there is still a greater burden on the legislature and the legislators to be more critical, to be more reflective in their thoughts and in their conduct, and in discharging the performance of their duties to Nigerians. And I think that going forward, this should define the National Assembly. I'm happy with the kind of comments I saw yesterday at the validatory session. There were some very frank comments from legislators. Senator Adeye, for instance, raised issues about quorum, about punctuality. What you would think are minor issues that should be taken for granted after 20 years. You see the legislators sit and there's so much absenteeism. For example, when bills are passed, at the committee of the whole, sometimes there are live sessions on NTA. You see how many you can count with your fingertips, how many legislators are there. At that very critical stage of passing a bill, because that's the final stage of passing a bill, there are no legislators seated. So, I know that there are other functions, there are representative functions, they need to go on oversight, but there are some critical, especially when it has to do with the optics that people see. These are things that determine whether or not they believe that their functions are creditably being delivered upon.
All right. Okay, Pierre, thank you very much there for your opening salvo. Let's bring in the other guests again. First, Senator Aliu Sabi Abdullahi. Now, in drafting the history of the National Assembly in the first 20 years of Fourth Republic, what, in your opinion, will be the milestones?
Well, first, I think before I go straight into this, permit me, based on some of the comments made, to clarify one or two things. You see, we need to, in actually looking at the legislature, we must also be fair on one point. Is it the same set of people from 1999 to date? The obvious answer is clear to us. If you look at the rate of turnover, because of that same learning curve, the turnover rate is too high. And so up to this very moment, one of the things the legislature is still battling with is the same issue of corporate memory I talked about earlier, in such a manner that the number of people who will be available to provide a guide going forward is so reduced that sometimes certain things are even missed. And so I think in looking at it, we must begin to understand that our democracy is still evolving. There are places where, for example, there is this deep-rooted zoning. Somebody will tell you, I can't go for more than 2 terms. Some people is even 1 term. There are constituencies that is only 1 term. Nobody has ever gone 2. So these are also nuances that we must, take note of as a critical challenge for this particular institution. Because, of course, people who have experience, the moment they are in a place, they are able to provide better guidance. They know where the pitfalls are, and they can guide so that you can actually fast-track the rate at which. And I think what we have done right now is we are trying as much as possible to improve on documentation so that people can have references which have not been there before. So having said this, first let me say that as a milestone, I think we need to situate the legislature within the context of have they risen up to national challenges, I think the legislature have risen up to some national challenges. The third term agenda is one key milestone the legislature was able to score. The second one was the issue of the doctrine of necessity, where we almost had a very serious national crisis. So these two are critical. And if you also look at it, even in the fight against corruption, I think the legislature it cannot be taken away in the milestone, because the EFCC Act and the ICPC were all creations of the National Assembly. And if you look at what is also happening, for example, in the 8th Senate, the NFIU Act was a major keystone. What Nigerians may not know is that, but for that intervention, those holding MasterCard, Visa, and all these things will not be able to operate, because Nigeria will have been suspended from the global financial system. So I think there are critical milestones that we've been able to score. And apart from that, there were a lot of investigative hearings that the National Assembly has been able to rise up to the occasion, to stand its feet and expose, in line with the provisions of the Constitution that says expose corruption, inefficiencies, and waste in government. I think the journalists have said, sorry, I can't.
Pierre,
okay, yes.
Other
you know,
people, yes.
like he said, there are quite a lot of work to be done. But my joy here is the fact that I think based on the 20 years we've had going forward, we seem to be having a traction in building gradual, incremental progress. And I think the more we begin to underscore the progress that is being made, the better we're able to attract people to see the need to want to join in that particular line of progress. So I think overall, these are my few take on this.
All right.
See, Kingsley, actually, the positive side of the National Assembly, which he has explained, is well understood. But the other aspect, which may include conduct of legislators, okay, Pierre mentioned the absenteeism. And, of course, there are poor oversight function on the part of legislators. Let us be clear about how Nigerians feel. All right. Nigerians feel that what you mentioned earlier with respect to people who have garnered experience over the years to be able to adapt to the challenges of legislative works and what have you, that may not hold because where I come from, for instance, we've had a senator who's been there for 18 years or thereabout, right, and in so many other constituencies as well. So the thing here is about the behavioral pattern of the persons who have been elected to represent their people at the National Assembly. We are talking about 9th Assembly now, which means we have had 8 of them in the past. And you discover that what happened in the 5th or 6th will reoccur in the 7th, and again in the 8th Assembly, and perhaps in the 9th, as case may be. So what we're saying is, when will there be a time when legislators will understand? I'm sure most of them are educated to a reasonable level, right? To understand that this is a regulation. We have regulations guiding what we're doing. Why don't we adhere to that? So it's all part of the, the reasons why many Nigerians are not at home with the manner and way legislators conduct themselves. And I'd like Namdas to come in here. What are those pitfalls, as we may pick up, within this period we're talking about, from 1999 to 2019?
Well, thank you so much. Let me say that so much people, analysts and or the media always talked about, for example, absenteeism in the National Assembly. He pointed out in the Committee of the Whole, that is true, that the critical lawmaking function is when you are doing the aspect of, let's say, finalizing the law by Committee of the Whole, considering the reports and what have you. You sometimes see the population not quite encouraging. But that is not all the time. Let me give an example. When you just come out from an election, in the APC, I will be very clear here. Out of the 223 of us in the APC alone, only 62 of us return the whole of the National Assembly. 62 return. Now you find that the majority are not back. That was why he mentioned about the rate of attrition. So for those who didn't come back, sometimes at this critical period, they are always not in the assembly. Because some of them have lost out, they are trying to take other professions and what have you. But in the beginning,
to lick their wounds as well.
in the beginning, it is not like that. When you, like, if we inaugurate this assembly on the 11th, but especially in the next 3 years, you find out that the attendance is quite encouraging. So it's not all the time that you see this kind of scenario. And my point again on oversight functioning is that, or even the absenteeism, as he knows, as a legislator, when you are not in the plenary, you are excused, for example, if you are having an oversight function somewhere. It is still a legislative business. Or if you are in your constituency doing the job of representation, it is still a legislative job. But, you know, people just look at the hallowed chamber. Once you are not there, it means you are not just there. But that's not true. Again, the issue of oversight function, we are supposed to go out on oversight function to see what is actually happening. But again, the perception also matters. I think it's important for Nigerians to know that if I go on an oversight function, I'm doing my core legislative duties. But most critics will say, if you see this National Assembly has come, you go to ministry, they are coming for money. I mean, it's embarrassing that this is not the only job I've done in my life. I have done other functions before coming here. It's unfair for you to always believe that when somebody comes as a chairman on information, I come to NTA because government has appropriated funds here. Let me see the judicial use of this fund. And the moment I set my foot in NTA, you begin to scamper that, look, these men are coming in for money. We have had cases where the likes of Jega came out and said, committee chairmen are busy asking for money. And I responded as a spokesman of the House. I said, well, it's unfair. Reason being that if you are a chief executive at this particular time, well in office, and a legislator or a chairman of committee comes to you seeking for money, being a man of integrity, what you do is to expose that particular person right there and then. You don't wait after you leave office and until when you are called upon to write books or present papers that you begin to tell Nigerians your memory, your encounter. It does not even help the system. So if we expose these corrupt activities, legislators on their own will begin to know that, look, but we have to do the right thing. But I can tell you that nobody goes to any function with the sole aim of making money, because it's not a making money business. We have the media, we have EFCC, the ICPC, and even the man in charge to expose corruption. So I think we've been doing our...
Numbers, are you speaking for yourself or for the entire members of the National Assembly? Because what Jega said has also been said by chief executives of certain parastatals.
What I'm listening to what I'm saying. If you say X has demanded for money, what I'm saying, what did you do at the time that thing happened? Because you are also complicit. For you to wait until I get out of office, and then your village people call you to come and present the paper, and then you begin to say this matter, you have not helped the system. So what we are saying is that this thing is not a one-man thing. We live within a society. I'm not saying we're 100% perfect, but where there are issues like this, expose the corruption, but don't wait and always heap blames. I'm not saying as you expose, Nigeria will be even very happy with you that you have done so.
Honorable Namdas, in addition to or different from what Senator Sabi Abdullahi said with regard to the milestones of the National Assembly in the last 20 years, what are your own contributions?
Yes, let me give an example. When you come to budget activities in the National Assembly, the Constitution says, look, that the budget will be laid in the joint sitting of the National Assembly. Now, when you lay the budget, it is our duty now to turn it into a bill and work on this. Now, but because the Head Assembly, for instance, created a milestone by saying, okay, we are going to do we are going to do public hearing. And this public hearing is the creation of the Head Assembly. Because by our job, by our nature of our operations, we are not supposed to even call for any public hearing because we're being elected by you to come and represent. I should represent you in Abuja. So whatever decision I take is on your behalf. But because of the way Nigerians are not comfortable sometimes the way the budget is being done, they feel there is problems here. We say, okay, let us invite experts in budget matters, academicians, civil society organizations to come and give us their own input and then we add to the one we have, then it becomes the people's budget. But even when you pass this budget, after going through all the oversight function, sometimes you still hear, well, it's a milestone as far as I'm concerned. And again, the PIB bill he was talking about, the PIB bill was an initiative of the National Assembly. It didn't come from the executive. It should have come from the executive, but it was the National Assembly itself that came up with the PIB bill. And finally, sir, the 8th Assembly was able to do constitutional alteration. At least now, we have altered the Constitution. We have been able to bring in the Not Too Young to Run bill. Look at even the minimum wage that people talked about. The proposal from the executive is 27,000. It is the National Assembly that opted to 30,000. Is also a milestone, in my opinion.
Well, talking about milestone, very understandable. But I'd like Professor Gidado to come in here. The aspect of budgeting, which Honorable Namdas raised now, I recall that the 2018 budget took about 6 months at the National Assembly for it to be passed. And the executive, at the same time, accused the National Assembly of budget padding. We had it for the very first time, in the last dispensation. And now the question to be asked is, what could have led to 6 months delay in passing the budget at the National Assembly, whereas it is believed that there is a section of the National Assembly that works with the executive, ab initio, when the budget is being articulated. Right. Please educate us here on the issue of these delays. Is it a healthy development? Because it has continued since 1999. We've never had January to December budget cycle in this country. What's the problem?
Yes, Kirian, let me tell you, I just want to state that if there's a challenge that the legislative experience over these 20 years has had, and which there had been no improvement, is on this issue of late passage of budget. Now, the previous assemblies have tried right up to the 8th. I just hope the 9th will get it right. Because the executive, try as they might, would present the budget or the appropriation bill by November, December, sometimes October. Now, I can see the examples or the reasons they always give that would make them stretch it up to March or even April or even June, of the following year before such a budget is sent to the president for assent. That does not speak well. And I think the major problem is the fact that the executive doesn't sit with the legislature before bringing this bill to the National Assembly. If they do, if there's that synergy, let it not even with it should just be with the leadership. If you get members of the leadership of the National Assembly or those who actually work on the committees on budget, you sit down with the executive, the ministers, the MDAs, executive representatives, and you propose bills relating to an appropriation that you are taking to the House. If they are carried along, in other words, if they are aware of what you are bringing in, and they chip in, like this aspect of the minimum wage, or Namdas mentioned, if the executive proposed 27, and members of the legislature were there with them, and they also chip in why it should be 30, then there will be no need for any debate when it comes to the National Assembly. Or even if there will be, it will just be minimal, and it won't be time-consuming. But where you don't carry them along, and it's their constitutional right for oversighting this, they're not rubber stamps. You don't just bring an amount and you expect them to just pass down the bill within a very short period of 2 weeks. But they need time to study and also invite experts, like through the public hearings.
Up to 6 months?
No, it shouldn't be up to 6 months, definitely. But as I said, if it will minimize this period of their dragging it to this very 6 or 5 months, if there's that synergy where they sit and agree or harmonize or minimize areas of conflict, areas where they differ in terms of, I mean, even if it's pegging like the amount of money or the amount of naira to a dollar that the budget is being premised on. These are things that could have been taken up in issue and not just debated on the floor when it gets to the National Assembly.
Yeah, Professor,
so I believe this is where they've been having it, wrong.
Yeah, Professor Maxwell Gidado, still on the issue of appropriation, the view has often been expressed that perhaps the most important power that the legislature has is that of appropriation. But in 20 years of the Fourth Republic, what remains unresolved is the extent of the power of appropriation. The yin and yang between the executive and the legislature over the enlargement, usually, of the size of the appropriation is one that continues. There also appears to be some reluctance in testing this issue in the courts. Why have we had this lingering issue? The executive proposes, say, 8 trillion. Legislature will take it to 8.5 or 9 trillion. And in the meantime, it's the executive that has a panoramic sweep or view of the sources of revenue.
If I can just come in. First, let's get one fact very clear. Why do we have a democracy? We have a democracy because we want everybody who is in that particular country to know that there is a government. Like the Constitution says, the primary purpose of government is the security and the welfare of the citizens. And I think arising from this, we have federal constituencies and senatorial districts so that we create a balance in a manner that, like the Constitution says, every segment of this country will have a sense of belonging in terms of the resources of this country and how these resources are going to be spent. Here we are, there are parts of this country today that for the past 30 years have never seen one federal budget. But today, if you look at the aspect of our democracy, through the instrument of, for example, the constituency project that some people tend to condemn, they are able to get 1 or 2 federal projects. So to come back to what Prof said, you see, the budget process, if the executive that is supposed to implement carries the representative of the people who are very vast and aware of the needs of the people, because we go to campaign and we go around to meet people, give me your vote so that I can represent you. And in doing so, they will say, well, our basic problem is water, our basic problem is this road, our basic problem is we don't have electricity, our basic problem is we don't have classrooms. And then the key instrument, which is the national budget, that is supposed to now release resources for this to happen. And you as a representative, you don't even have any insight into what is coming. Then you now fold your arms. How do you go back to meet your people? So I think this is where the whole issue starts. And like I will always maintain, I was in the executive side. I worked as a civil servant, and I was involved in budget and planning. And I will tell you today, there are directors that are able to commandeer projects to their own place at the detriment of other people. The Constitution is very clear. Section 2, that is the directive principles of state policy. Chapter 2. It says very clearly, all those who are holding legislative, judicial, or executive powers are to imbibe the principle enshrined in that particular section. And it says that in doing so, if you are going to share your project, you must carry every segment along. So the point to ask here is, when this budget is brought, I'm representing Niger North. My interest is, I want to see the Trunk A road, for example, that cuts across my senatorial district. What is the current status? And what is government doing to address it? I think if we deny the legislators that, then it is not the legislators, it is the people who are the key drivers of our democracy that have been denied. So I agree that, yes, it may be, it's too long, but I want to assure you, we also are concerned because we believe the budget process can be finished within 3 months. If the executive will bring in their submission at a particular given time, and then we have a calendar. And I think in this night's assembly, under the instruments of the leadership Senator Ahmed Lawal is pursuing, we as a group, we've agreed that we want a change in this direction. And Senator Ahmed Lawal, for example, is proposing that we'll work together with the executive to have an agreed calendar jointly to say, for example, by September, come and give us your proposal. We'll go into the next line of actions. And during this period, all chief executives must be prevented from traveling. Because one of the challenges, let me land on this. One of the challenges we are facing is when it comes to the budget cycle, the committees, when they call for budget defense, some of the chief executive and even ministers are not available to come and defend their budget. So I think these are critical issues that we must look at so that at the end of the day, and that is where I agree with Prof, that the element of engagement and participation at the level of conceptualization and preparing budget is key. And where that happens, you will see that you are reducing the level of altercation that may happen.
All right. I just wanted to, before he comes in, sorry, just to let me not lose memory of what he's saying. Professor Maxwell Gidedo is one of our consultants in the National Assembly as far as the constitutional amendment is concerned. I am also a member of the Constitutional Review Committee in the House of Representatives. He is quite aware that we amended a section of the Constitution to say, look, the president should lay the budget 3 months, let's say in September, 3 months before the end of the year. We have passed that. It is already on the table of the president. If the executive has assented to this, then it is going to be binding on the executive that they must present this budget 3 months earlier before the end of the year. And that probably we were doing it with the hope that we can get back to the January, December thing. But I can tell you that you always see budgets being presented in December. And yet, what comes to the mind is not the presentation, is the person. I think once the executive will have done their own side, but the needful, we wouldn't have gone through this
Honorable
process.
Nabdas, thank you very much. Okay, Pierre, this is a matter that's come up fairly frequently. Some persons will have argued, look, why do you know which MTEF ought to be presented? MTEF comes first, and thereafter, the appropriation bill. And MTEF, of course, has its time lag before the end of, yes, the fiscal strategy paper, before you get to the end of the financial year. But in addition to this challenge of getting the budget passed timeously, there is also the issue of the allocative powers of the legislature. Distinguished Senator Abdullahi Sapi has already mentioned why they think that they have to intervene. That matter remains unresolved. Do you think that this is one matter that we can overcome, considering also what may be the mindset of the executive, that it is not necessarily the president himself, or for that matter, the Minister of Budget and National Planning, as it was known up until the 28th of May, that is doing that, but that you actually have civil servants, the bureaucracy, who prepared the groundwork, and in the meantime, are self-dealing. So is this something that we can overcome so that the fight at the arms of government, the top of the arms of government, can be reduced, and then the economy, it will have the benefit of early passage and speedy implementation?
I think that there's been a lot of lack of sincerity on the budgetary process from both sides of the divide. The law is clear. You have made the point about the Fiscal Responsibility Act. This administration, to the best of my knowledge, has not at any point in time complied with the submission of the MTEP and the budget bill timelessly, respect to the timelines given. The Act says, for instance, that the MTF needs to be submitted or to be submitted by the second quarter, by the end of the second quarter. Then the budget comes in, I think, by the third quarter, around September. But we have seen the budget submitted not later than November in this administration. So like Honorable Namda said, there's a flip side to it. There's the side about budget submission. There's also the side about the budget passage. And Nigerians should not lose this perspective. Unfortunately, they lose it, but because the legislature has come to, pick up this very bad image of itself, and it is not doing much, quite a lot, really, to change the narrative. And this is why I come in on respect to the sincerity issue. The distinguished senator made the point about what they want to do in the Ninth Assembly. I think they've had the opportunity to do that in the 8th Assembly. Senator Olawan, for instance, is the majority leader of the Senate. And as the chief interface officer between the Senate and the executive, I mean, we are not aware that he has come out to say that there have been issues with respect to getting the executive to submit the budget and the MTF as required by law. What efforts have the legislature made to ensure that the law as required on the budgetary process is adhered to? If the legislature is not able to communicate to Nigerians or convince Nigerians that these are the setbacks that we face in getting the executive to comply with the laws of the country, then there is a problem. And so there is this thing about, okay, whose interest is it that we are serving? Is it the interest of the citizens, or is it the interest of the legislature, legislators, or the executive and the officials in the presidency? Like he also said, some directors are powerful enough to commandeer projects to their own localities. And, senators were empowered, elected to deliver democracy dividends to their constituents are left dry and high. That should not be so. But it should not also be so that senators and members of the House of Reps should insist on having projects that are better, within the purview of local councils and state governments to insist on such projects being on the national budget. And I think that's where the issue of constituency projects has been most controversial. There needs to be that agreement. There needs to be that conversation, very sincere conversation around what kind of projects we want to see on the federal budget. Yes, your people need borehole. It's your duty to provide boreholes for your people. What's the local council doing? What's the state government doing? Must we bring such boreholes to the national budget? So these are the questions. We need to agree on these parameters. And until we have that agreement, these contentions are not likely to go away. And there will be this papering over these disagreements in the name of politics and family affair. And at the end of the day, Nigerians continue to suffer. So it's more about sincerity of purpose. So what do we want to do? Do we want the budget to really work? If we want the budget to work, we apply the laws. If we do not apply the laws, we apply sanctions. There are sanctions. There's consequence for bad behavior. Okay, so if we do not want to go to that extreme, then let's judge or let's sit down. Like I said in my opening statement, this is all about, the challenge, the democratization of dissent and, the politics of accommodation. If we do not think that the other people have a right to dissent to your position, then there's a problem. If you do not think that you have a way to accommodate their own positions, then there's a problem. We must be able to marry both of these, tendencies together to make the budget work for the citizens of Nigeria.
All right, thank you very much indeed. I pick one word or two, sincerity of purpose. And that's why we have a diverse arguments with respect to what the executive referred to as budget padding, and what our distinguished senator has described as a way of ensuring that the people he's representing get something from the federal government. But Oke made a good point here, which has to do with the fact that we have state government. We also have state houses of assembly. And these houses of assembly members are also responsible for their people, especially areas where you also come from at the federal level. And if we have to wait for every member of the National Assembly to have a project for his constituency, then a budget may never be passed for a year, if that is the case. So I think from what Oke said, it's very apt. There has to be sincerity of purpose. Sit down and talk it over. Do you have the power to allocate funds as a member of National Assembly? Who has the power to allocate funds as currently asked? Is it the executive or the legislature?
Enlarge the proposal.
You're not coming in here. We're just doing a summary.
Summary.
Let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll move into other perspectives of this conversation.
Including taking the tweets from our viewers.
Exactly. So stay tuned. You are watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We'll be right back.
NTA Television College Jos announces admissions into 2-year diploma programs in film and television production, television engineering, and broadcast journalism. The sale of forms will commence on the 13th of May and run through 30th July 2019. Admission forms can be obtained from all marketing offices, NTA state capital stations, zonal centers, or at the office of the academic secretary, NTA Television College, Rayfield, Jos.
On payment of a non-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA TV College. Applicants can also obtain the forms through the NTA TV College portal at www.ntatvc.edu.nj.
Applicants are required to possess 5 credits in GCE or SSCE in relevant areas of study in not more than 2 sittings, including English and mathematics. All properly completed forms attached with photocopies of credentials must be submitted on or before 30th July 2019. For further inquiries, please visit our website at ntatvc.com or call 0803 3144 383.
NTA TV College, training you to be the best you want to be.
Registrar, Announcer.
Why don't you people sell imported materials here? As beautiful as the shop is.
Auntie, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. Really? And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced. Change begins with me too. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, yo, welcome back, and let's go straight to the tweets. Many Nigerians have been reacting to our conversation this morning, so let's take the tweets. Kingsley?
All right, we have this one from Titus Monday Knock. It says, that's to say the lawmakers now at the national level, their take-home pay and allowances are so outrageous that people fight to death just to get there without making any impact on national issues.
Okay, Shaibu Al-Khali, 20 years of legislative activities in Nigeria was very poor in terms of everything. We wish the 9th Assembly will work for Nigerians, not for themselves. Welcome to the next level.
Festus Akimboyewa, the legislature plays an effective role in the functioning of democratic governance through lawmaking, scrutiny of expenditure and policies of the government. Sadly, the past 20 years of legislative activities have been below par. Time for a change.
All right, Akeju Alabaju, the 9th Assembly should focus more on laws of overall national interest. As federal lawmaker, they should be less concerned on motions that are localized within constituencies. It is wasteful in real time and space. Such should be for state or local legislators.
Dele Jack Solomon, over the years, there has never been a harmonious relationship between the executive and the legislature. And as such, it has hampered the delivery of dividends of democracy to Nigerians. The two arms of government should learn to work together for the well-being of the country.
All right, Mike Ayako, this one is totally out of place, you know. But no, we're not going to skip it, Kingsley. He's addressing to you. He says, Kingsley, I sincerely wish that a good number of you guys at the NTA Good Morning Nigeria get political appointments in the presidency because of the good stuff you people are made of. Bravo. Thank you very much indeed for appreciating us. I mean, we are doing our job, right?
Well, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mike Ayako. We hope that our viewers will continue to tune in at home and abroad. Shakiru has the next tweet. 20 years of legislative activities in Nigeria had advantages and benefits. This is due to the sustenance of the country's democracy. Each assembly has tried its best for the country's growth.
Now, Mutana Farouk, 20 years of legislative activities in Nigeria could be averagely described as a democratic dividend of Komisomeka. I don't know what it means. Perhaps it means that Nigeria needs more robust activities.
What is saying democracy? Sorry, I said democratic dividend of Komsi Komsa.
Komsi.
Yeah, but unfortunately the spelling there is
wrong. Yes, okay. So that's from Mutana Farouk.
Sonny Michael Omakoji, one of our regulars. The beauty of democracy is that no arm of government is a rubber stamp. But a situation where that is done out of hatred to frustrate governance is unacceptable. The Ninth Assembly must learn from the past and make amends where necessary.
Dele Jack Solomon. Democracy can only be sustained when legislators have the will, ability, and information to make decisions that reflect the interests and needs of the society. Also, the governed must have the will, ability, and information to transmit their needs and interests to their legislators and to evaluate the performance of the legislators or sanction their actions. Unfortunately, in our context, reverse is the case. Our legislators are most known for collecting huge salaries and bonuses and sleeping on duty, while the people have failed to hold them accountable.
Well, I doubt if we have instances of lawmakers sleeping in the chambers now. Frank Olize, of course, who was a colleague here at NTA, had some good shots then from the Second Republic, where the National Assembly was based in Lagos. You could see federal lawmakers.
Have you monitored the deliberations lately? Have you monitored the deliberations lately?
I haven't lately, I must admit. But if they are still sleeping, then Senator Sabi and Honorable Namdas will tell us why they are not serving their colleagues coffee so that they can stay awake. Now, this is coming from Musa Hadeja. He said, I hope that the incoming legislators will make robust legislation their priority, coupled with constant visit to their constituencies.
Mutana Farouk. Laws are political architectures that shape the political and social economic activities of a nation. Therefore, the legislative job should not be left alone in the hands of politicians who cannot obey the laws they enacted. Bicameral legislature is just a basket for saving water.
All right. Chris Simeon tweets. It says, the Nigerian legislature is under tremendous influence. For instance, the passage of bills is always sluggish, and this takes a pretty long while.
Now, Law Alpha, the legislature for the 20 years had in their midst seasoned and experienced lawmakers, with majority of them that are there to serve themselves. No thanks to the volume of remunerations they corner for themselves.
Akeju Olagbaju again. We're looking forward to when our political system will evolve and have more career politicians. A career politician is committed to legislative functions and duties and earns salaries and moderate allowances. I know we will attain the level in the interest of our democracy.
First or second, the level of knowledge and expertise in our legislature is low. That's why there are many drafting errors in the bills they sent to the president for assent. This needs to be addressed in the Ninth Assembly.
All right. Mike Ayankwo tweets, we need a virile and robust legislature to deepen our democracy. The leadership of the legislature must be independent and always ensure that they pursue the people's agenda. They must not be confrontational with the executive. Absenteeism should attract severe reprimand. Those are the tweets that we are taking. Kyria, that's the point. We're getting pressed now. Professor Maxwell Gidado, while making his opening comment, did say that the legislature is one of the most misunderstood arms of government. What exactly do you mean? And in our instant case, in 20 years, what has been that level of misunderstanding?
Yes. Now, Kisley, what I made that statement of, or why I said it, is that, you see, when you trace the history of democracy in the country, from 1960, if we had had an uninterrupted democratic experience till date, we would have gotten it right by now. Most of the misconceptions that people have been having about the legislature would have at least been diminished. But the military interregnum comes and obliterates the legislature and leaves only the executive and the judiciary. So Nigerians are quite, familiar with the two arms without this first arm actually being on board until we now came to the Fourth Republic. So with the aspects of salaries, allowances, and some even are proposing that they should be part-time. They shouldn't be full-time. And some also look at the legislature as a retirement home for some governors. So you see, so many conjecture, so many pictures are being painted of the legislature. That was what made me to conclude that it is the most misunderstood. People just see it as a place, where, for instance, people go and collect humongous, sums of money as salaries and allowances and do nothing.
Prof, wouldn't you think also that Nigerians are even are having better understanding of legislature? Because, well, biblically speaking, by their fruits ye shall know them. And the people, you've listened to what people have been saying in the tweets this morning. These are views of individuals and perhaps majority of Nigerians who are not politicians. That's exactly their perspective when it comes to National Assembly matters, especially the humongous salary and the allowances that you have. Let me remind you this before you come in. When the President Kenyatta took over, in Kenya as president, within the first 3 months, the legislature, they just slashed their pay. Agreed. Everybody agreed that it should be slashed, that it's on the high side. Today, Nigerian legislators are the highest paid globally. No. Please, you can correct the impression.
Before Senator Sabi comes, let's also get the views. Senator Sabi, let's get the views of Okepia on this. Is there a misunderstanding of the legislature in our democracy? 20 years. Has there also been a conflation of their duties? Because some of them, it is alleged, like to pose or compete with the executive. Then the people also approach them as though they were the executive.
Yes, there is a misunderstanding. But there is also little or no attempt or sustained attempt by the legislature and legislators themselves to mitigate that misunderstanding. So I talked about conduct earlier. They continually engage in conduct that exacerbates that misunderstanding. The issues of allowances and salaries, the issues of absenteeism, sometimes even truancy. I mean, there are senators, members of the House of Reps in this current expiring assembly, you could count the number of times they showed up in plenary. They were not doing any oversight. So this is about the things that they did or failed to do that reinforces this misunderstanding. There is a basic misunderstanding about the process of passage of bills and what the bills entails. So there needs to be some enlightenment and public education in those aspects. And I think at Other Paper we do quite a bit in that space. But with respect to conduct, that's where the challenge is. And you mentioned about, members of the legislature maybe conflating themselves with the executive. So, for instance, during campaigns, they say, we'll provide you this and that, and that's not their business. And they pretty much know it. But because they want to secure the votes, they will say those to the people so they can get the votes. And it becomes a challenge when they are in office to deliver on those promises. And that's why you see the issues around constituency projects become a quagmire, because they now have a challenge to ensure that those things feature in the budget. And the executive said, no, you can't have these things feature in the budget. And we are back to square one. So these are the issues. The National Assembly, going forward, must make it as an agenda to deliberately want to address this genuine misunderstanding and, be more purposeful and be more retrospective, be more transparent and accountable in its conduct. Salaries and allowances, the issues of, attendance, and contributions in plenary. Because Nigerians are getting to a point where there is a greater sense of accountability demand, and we cannot downplay that. It's showing up in the executive. It's going to catch up with the legislators. Nigerians want to know how many times you attend plenary. They want to know how many times, your name showed up in some scandal. If the House of Representatives, the current House of Representatives, for instance, had done something about some of the little bits of scandals that we have seen. Recently, the committee hearing, public procurements, PENCOM, there was a scandal. A member openly accused his colleague of, being a broker, trying to, and then nobody had anything about it. They said the leadership was going to look into the matter, and then it died. You see, if there was some transparency in addressing these issues, like they did in the 7th Assembly under Tambuwani Hedia, the subsidy scam, the actors were, they were penalized. Farouk Lawan was suspended. The matter is still in court. So there should be that sense. Nigerians should want to perceive that action, that decisive action from the leadership and the legislators themselves to want to address this misunderstanding. Otherwise, it will fester.
Well, thank you very much. I think I quite agree with the submission. And the only point I would like to make here is that there is always this issue of we are the highest paid legislators. I'm not going to go into a bigger debate because we will need more time to dissect some of the issues. But what I want to say is, based on empirical evidence, that statement is not true. I'm a researcher, and I will tell you that I've seen research documents that clearly showed that this position is not correct. That is perhaps for another day. But let's look at it. Yes, I agree in terms of behavior. I'm somebody who likes discipline. I was a civil servant, and I believe in discipline. Now, I agree that, yes, there are some politicians who are carefree. They tend to take certain things on serious. And I think over time, if you look at our other, what do they call it, the root book and other, what do they call it, books, you will see that clearly we are not unmindful of this. And that is why they are in our rule books, to say that don't do this, don't do this, don't do that. And I agree also that perhaps there is some laxity in terms of enforcement, even within ourselves. And I think that is a critical challenge going forward that the legislature must look for itself. But overall, let me say, honestly, the legislature still remains the most misunderstood arm of government. Okay. And the responsibility is not ours alone. The media and all other actors, they have a role there.
We'll stop you there because I'm not sure we have time for you to come because he has spoken on your behalf as a... maybe just 2 seconds.
Just 2 seconds.
Misunderstanding. Clarify the misunderstanding.
No, 2 seconds.
Let me say that there are people, even the elites and the well-read, are not aware that in the National Assembly, the Public Complaint Commission is an agency under the National Assembly. The National Institute of Legislative Studies is an agency under the National Assembly. The National Assembly Budget Office, NABRO, is an agency under the National Assembly. Now, people believe that 469 people, if the budget is 115 billion, it is 115 divided by 469. That's not true. These are some of the misconceptions. How I wish I had time as a spokesman to clarify for...
And we want to appreciate you.
after midnight on Saturday, you would not be a spokesman.
After leaving here.
All right. And one last one, not just a question, but a reference. When you go to states and see a member of National Assembly, on the move, perhaps attending a function, you see the kind of convoy, that he parades, and people look at that. And it's so people feel, look, if a National Assembly member can ride on about 7 or more cars going for a function, though of course there's a deal in their money making. One beyond these are...
Is it in the kidnap areas? Or
no.
All right. When you don't invite them, and you cannot stop it.
All right. But Kirian, in addition to that, just to say that we have had a guest on Good Morning Nigeria. It's a member of the House of Reps from Niger State. It was brought up by the late Bala Usman, a very Spartan gentleman. He has a 406 that I think one weather-beaten 406 that he uses around, probably also with a Marxist perspective. His brocade it's not as sharp as. I don't want to look in direct.
That's one in the medium. Gentlemen, we would like to thank you immensely for this morning for your contributions on Good Morning Nigeria. For today, first of all, we'd like to begin with distinguished Senator Sabi Abdullahi, Chairman Senate Committee on Media and Publicity. That's until Saturday.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. And Honorable Abdul Razak Namdas, the Chairman, House Committee on Media and Publicity. It's been wonderful hosting you this morning on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you, sir.
And not forgetting our friend, Professor Maxwell Gidado, Professor of Constitutional Law from the Nasarawa State University. It's been wonderful talking to you this morning.
Leonard Senior Advocate.
Okay, Leonard Senior. Lawyers are always... Okay, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. All right. And again, of course, we have our own man here, okay, Pierre. He's an analyst and, of course, the ED, that's the Executive Director of Order Paper Nigeria. Okay, it's been wonderful.
Senior Advocate of Order.
Okay, it's on that note, we'd like to thank you for tuning in to Good Morning Nigeria. We are back on Monday, same time. That's 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do enjoy the rest of your day and have a lovely weekend. And don't forget, next week, of course, Wednesday, June 12, will be the premier Democracy Day that the country will be observing. My name is Kingsley Usadalo.
And I'm Kirian Umar. Have a wonderful weekend.
Yes.